have a copy of 3910 in whatever office you're in. You sort of leave them there and have a bit of a look, so you need to be able to find your way around it. So we looked at the interpretation. Remember, the first chapter on the NZS 3910 was interpretation. And you'll recall that there were things we didn't quite expect. So, person would include DT, can include the Waikato River, and it can include you. Because you are a natural person. So, remember there can only be the client can be a person, which means it can be a corporation, it can be an organisation, or it can be an individual person. Same with the contractor. Recall that a day is actually Monday, Tuesday, as a working day, which is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, not Saturday, not Sunday, not public holidays. Okay, so it's a contract, it's law, you've probably never struck law before, but what you are doing is your whole career will be involved in working with these contracts, within contracts. Most of what you do will be under contract. Okay, so whether it's your company or you're the contract with your employer. So what we're looking at today is the engineer. Now the engineer, I mean, say, well, the engineer, but the engineer to the contract is a specific position. So you've got the principal, who is the person paying for it. You've got the contractor, the person that signed the contract with the principal to do the works. Okay, you've got the principal, who is the person once the work done, the contractor who signed the contract with the principal to do the works. Now they are both positions. Okay? There is another position, and that is called the engineer. Now remember, privacy of contract means that there is a construction contract, there's a contract between the principal and the contractor. Now there's probably a separate contract between the principal and the engineer, a consultancy contract. Remember we looked at those consultancy contracts Monday last week, and so it's a consultancy contract. But what we're doing is we're not talking about that at all. We are talking about the construction contract. So within that construction contract, there are two parties, the principal and the contractor. And they have obligations and rights. But there's a third party who's also in that relationship, who is not part of the contractual agreement, but is bestowed obligations and rights as part of the contract. The reason why they do that is they need an independent third party. Okay, a person that's going to be like the judge. The person that decides how much is going to be paid every month. So when the contractor makes a claim, a progress claim to the principal, the engineer, and it's the engineer that decides how much is to be paid, not the principal. Because if it's left to the principal, he's going to say, he's going to try to minimise it as much as he can. Okay, he's not really thinking what's fair, he's going to be thinking what's the minimum amount I can pay. So, that's not fair. There will also be claims. So if the contractor says that something's extra, it's not covered by the contract, I should be paid more money for it. It's the engineer who decides whether it is extra or not. Okay, not the principals who would say, no, nothing's extra, you do everything. Not the contractor who says, no, it's extra, I should be paid for it. It is the engineer. So this person is the neutral third party. Also, but it's a dual role. The engineer is also the advisor to the principal. So his job is to be a technical advisor, to act for the principal, to make sure the works are done properly, to make sure that the principal is advised on what his rights are and things like that. So he's got two things. He's supposed to be a neutral party, but he's also supposed to be a technical advisor to the principal, and he's paid by the principal. So can anyone see any problems there? Got this guy paid by the principal, but he has to be a neutral party. What problems can arise there? So if someone's paying you to do something, what do they expect you to do?
Do the job.
Yeah, so the principal thinks, I'm paying the guy, therefore he's on my side. Is that right?
No.
Why not? Yeah. It's not correct because the engineer's job under the contract is to be neutral. Okay. So we're going to look at that now. So what I've done is I've given you some sections out of NZX 3910. So what are the responsibilities of the engineer? Activities and flex. I just mentioned that. So the problem is that the engineer's been paid by the principal, but sometimes he has to make a ruling against it. The principal can say, oh, that variation that the contractor has claimed is not a variation, you should not pay it. Okay? So if the principal tells the engineer that, what does the engineer have to do? The principal, if the contractor says, oh, we were digging away, we found this rock, we consider it's a variation of the contract, we should be paid more and we will need to time. And the engineer goes along and says, yeah, that's right, it is rock, you should be paid extra. The principal comes along and says, no, I'm paying you, Mr. Engineer. You have to say to the contractor he has to do it free of charge. And what does the engineer have to do? Pardon?
Yes,
Not the engineer, right?
He's still responsible.
Yeah, so yeah, so he has to say, sorry, I know that you're the one that's paying me, but in this case, you have to pay the contractor. So, all because the principal is paying the engineer doesn't mean that he controls what he does and says. And that can cause all sorts of trouble. Okay, so you get clients that will come in and say, well, I'm paying you, how can you possibly make a decision that is against what I told you? You can say, well, I'm going to talk about it. Sometimes they say the engineer is one that client councils used to do this. So they have one person in the council signing as principal, and then another senior manager being the engineer. So the guy's in the client organisation. It's a council doing a council job. The engineer is a senior member of the council organisation, as a senior manager of council. Anyone see any problems there? So you're building a road for the council is the principal. The roading person signs the contracts and says, I'm the principal for this. And then the business manager of the council signs it, is named the engineer. What's the problem there?
There's no neutral party.
So, both from the same organisation. And I mean, that could be totally fair, guys, but what would be the perception? If you were sitting there as a contractor, what would you be thinking? Yeah. So you'd be thinking, how can they possibly say this guy's going to be neutral if he works for the organisation that he's supposed to be adjudicating against? It's like playing a game of football, the All Blacks playing the Australians. They say, oh, I tell you what, one of you Aussie guys will be the referee. Does that sound fair to you? If it was New Zealander, fair enough, it'd be fair, but if it was an Aussie, what's going to happen? It's going to cheat, yeah. Okay, so there's the problem, is that if he's part of the client organisation, it's perfectly legal for him to do that. It's just the perception. Every decision he makes, the contractor is going to be going, and the contracting industry, the wider contracting industry are going to go, that's not, he did that because he's part of the organisation. He's not being fair. So what's the problem with that in the long term? In the long term, your organisation is seen to be not playing fast and loose with this engineer thing, not being fair to people. What happens in the long term? Pardon? Well, people won't put in money, won't want to work for you, okay? And you're putting that before. Okay. So, appoints the engineer? So what I want you to do is look through here. Who appoints the engineer and then those roles as well? I just want you to have another look at those roles. Just have a look at that. So who appoints the engineer? So the principal, yeah. Okay, and what's the role of the engineer?
Contract.
6.2.1. So you can see there, 6.2.1a, it's your role of the engineer and the administration of the contract as an expert advisor to and representative of the principal. So the engineer's job is to also make sure that the works have been done properly, to do the inspections, to sign them off and say this has been done properly. Okay, but also to give direction, so make sure that the contractor is doing work properly. If the principal decides to change the works, the engineer is the one that gives them the instruction, not the principal. Okay, the principal oftentimes is not allowed to give instructions to the contractor. It's pretty funny, really. The principal has hired the contractor, but he's not allowed to give instructions to him. It has to go through the engineer, especially if there's additional work. He also receives payment claims and provides a payment schedule. In other words, every month there's a payment made to the contractor. Okay, and the person that decides how much is being paid is the engineer. So why do we pay the contractor? So if it's $1 million project, most contracts don't pay right at the end. So if you go and, so I was having my roof done, they put the roof on and then I paid them. Okay, but what do you think happens with a contract which is going to last a year or two? What's going to be the problem if you didn't get paid until right at the end, when the contract lasts a year or 6 months or something like that? What's the problem? Yeah, yeah. So what's the contractor going to do?
Distribute it.
No. Yeah. So if you're a contractor and you know you have to do $800,000 worth of work over a year and you're not getting paid for it until the end, what are you going to do when you put the price together? Yeah, you would put 10% on top of it. So if the principal doesn't allow for paying the contractor on a regular basis, then he is going to pay more than the price because the contractor has to go to the bank and loan the money to get him through until he does it. So every month there's what's called progress payments. And so what happens is the engineer assesses how much work has been done and then pays part of that to the contractor. It also means there's less chance of the contractor going broke. Remember cash flow, money in, money out. If the contractor's not got any money coming in and he can't pay his suppliers, can't pay his people, he goes bankrupt, and then the principal has to go and find someone else to do the work for him. Okay. So progress payments we'll look at that more later on. So the other person there is the engineer's representative. So what is the engineer's representative? So have a look at that. I've got it on the back of the page, point 3. What is the engineer's representative? engineer's representative? Who appoints them? The engineer, yeah. What does the engineer's representative do? Reporting, yeah. So the engineer's representative is responsible for the day-to-day management of the contract. Now, I've been an engineer's representative lots of times, never been an engineer. So the engineer is usually a senior member of the consultancy. And oftentimes you'll see him or her at the beginning of the contract, when you're doing a set-up meeting, and at the end when there's a site, when there's an inspection. And hardly ever will they go to site after that during the work, unless there's a problem. So the engineer is usually remote from the project. It's the engineer's representative who is on site every day, working with the contractor's representative to work through the whole works. Okay? So they do the contract administration. When the contractor has a claim or a problem, the first person he goes to is the engineer's representative. Okay, if there's a variation, if they say, oh, we found rock, it's an extra, it's the engineer's representative who will look at it. Okay, now that middle clause there says each 6.3.3b says the engineer's representative may exercise any powers vested in the engineer under the contract consent, valuing the variation, provision of payment schedules, issuing of practical. Now, those first two there, you actually end up doing them. You do prepare a draft payment certificate and stuff like that. But what happens is the engineer's representative prepares the draft and the engineer signs it. Okay, but so you're doing all the secretarial work for the engineer, for him just to sign it all. He's the one doing daily communication with the contractor. He's the one that's sort of clarifying design details. He's the one that does the site diary, tracks the work, what progress has happened, all that sort of stuff. Okay? So, and that's a job that you'll undertake. Okay, that's where you sort of fit in. So it's the day-to-day management of the work. Okay, so what I want you to do now is just have a look at these things here, these two situations. So halfway through a 4-month contract, person appointed as the engineer becomes sick and needs to take 3 months off work, a new engineer is required. How is that done? So looking at those pages there, where do you think you might find information about that situation? Look at the section headings only. Where do you think you might find information about this question? Sorry? On the first page, on the second page, where would you find information about it? Appointment of engineer. Now, in the exam, you're expected to be able to, I'll ask a question like this, you're expected to find it. Okay? So, have a look at that and tell me what happens now. So, you go through the headings, and you look at it and you think, yeah, appointment of engineer, that sounds about right, then you start reading. Okay. So what happens? There's a new engineer, what do you do? Halfway through the contract. Yeah, so who does it? The principal. And what does the principal have to do?
Appoint a suitably qualified person.
Yep, and then what happens? What happens to the contractor that doesn't like them? So he has to notify the contractor. What is, if the contractor doesn't like him, what happens?
Too bad.
He has to consider representations from the contractor. In other words, if the contractor says, I don't like that guy, he's a bit strict, then I think the principal would say that's tough. I don't like that guy because he's, whatever, lots of reasons. Well, I don't, that guy's a crook, proven to be a crook, we don't trust him, then, yeah, that'd be a fair statement, okay, and the principal is not. So, the decision on who the new engineer is going to be goes to the principal, but the principal has to listen to the contractor. And if the contractor has actually made a fair comment about the engineer, and the principal has just ignored it, and it ends up being a problem, then the principal could be sort of taken to task for it. The principal has to be seen to take it into consideration. So if the principal names this guy and the contractor says, I disagree with him, he's your brother, and also he's a crook, he's been to jail for fraud, he's an untrustworthy person and he's your brother, I don't think he's going to be a fair engineer. And if the principal says, oh, no, he's all right now. And then it goes on, and then if something happens, the engineer makes a decision against the contractor takes it to court, then that'll come up. It'll come up and say, the contractor objected to this person because this, and this. He was appointed nevertheless by the principal, who should have considered that the guy was related to him and couldn't be neutral, and that he was also a bit of a crook, okay, and therefore it would be looked on badly. Okay, so if the principal doesn't do that, doesn't consider that, and if the contractor makes a good point, then the principal could be, if it comes to a dispute, the court would rule against the principal. Okay, just while we're here, for the Jackman Avenue contracts, who was the engineer, who was the engineer, and who was the engineer's representative? So where would you find that information? So you want to know who the engineer is and who's the engineer's representative. Where are you going to find that information? Are you going to find it in NCDS 3910? No? Where are you going to find it? Is everyone flipping through? What are you all flipping through? Which document have you got? Which document have you got in your hand there? Which document should you have in your hand right now looking for that? Yeah, that's it.
General.
You should have this. So what part of this are you going to be looking at? You're going to be looking at the specifications? Are you going to be looking at the drawings? So what part of the contract are you going to be looking at in the document? Okay, so you're looking at the special conditions. So if you started right from the start of special conditions, or where would you go down to find out the special conditions? What clause would you look under? So looking at the general conditions, section 6. So where are you going to look in the special conditions? You're going to be looking at 6.1. Who's the engineer? Come on, shout it out.
James Brown.
James Brown, yeah. And who is the engineer's representative?
Fred Smith.
Good. And where did you find it?
6.1.
Okay, so 6.1.2. 6.1.2. 6.1.2. Okay, general conditions, specific conditions, special conditions. So that's 6.1.2 there refers to here. 6.1.2, the name and professional qualifications of the engineer shall be set out in these special conditions right here. Okay, this and this work together. Okay. Okay, this last one here, I've actually cut it off. I haven't given you the page, I haven't answered on there. So, contractor encounters layer of soft rock. Immediately claims the variation from the on-site engineer's representative. The engineer's representative says that it's not a variation. The contractor disagrees with this decision. What can he do? He can go to the engineer. What does the engineer have to do? So the contractor says, your engineer's representative has made a decision which we disagree with. Does the engineer say, no, he's a good lad, no problems, not going to look at that, I trust what he says? Is that what the engineer should say? Remembering the engineer is probably your boss, you're the engineer's representative. So the engineer is the engineer's representative's boss, he's the one that appointed him. Should he just say, no, I trust him? Or what should he do? So there's a dispute there. Contractor is saying, we disagree with what the engineer's representative said. What does the engineer have to do? Can he just say, oh, no problems, he's trust him? Okay, no. He has to be a neutral party. I don't know how many times I have to say this. He's a neutral party, he's the judge, he has to be unbiased. He has to investigate it, and if he finds that it's the engineer's representative is wrong, then he has to say that, even though the engineer's representative works with him. Okay? This is all basic contract stuff, and this will happen to you when you get on site. If you don't understand it, you better start understanding. These are easy stuff. Wait till you get there and there's real stuff happening. Okay, so subcontractors. The subcontractor. So, what's a subcontractor? What is a subcontractor?
Another contractor hired by the main contractor.
So he's been hired by the contractor. Yeah. So he's been hired by the contractor. It might be that the contractor doesn't have enough resources to do the work, so he might need a few extra diggers to do an earthworks project, or it might be that he doesn't have specialised equipment, so he might need someone to seal his road, and he doesn't have the equipment to seal the road, or he might need someone to drill some holes, and he doesn't have that sort of skills to drill holes, or he might have someone that needs to be concreting, and he doesn't have concreting skills. Okay, so they're employed by the contractor to provide additional resources or specialist skills. So we've got the principal, and he has a contract with the contractor, who has a contract with the subcontractor. Can the principal tell the subcontractor what to do? No. Who does he tell what to do? Contractor. So the principal cannot tell the subcontractor what to do because why? There's no contractual relationship. If the subcontractor screws up, who pays for it? Contractor. Okay. So another thing is that there's a contract between the contractor and the subcontractor. So I had a case once where I was the principal, Fulton Hogan was the contractor, and there was a cowboy that Fulton Hogan had hired as a subcontractor. And they had a contract agreement which said that Fulton Hogan had to pass their claims on to me. And these guys made a totally ridiculous claim. And Fulton Hogan had to pass it on to me. And I have to tell them this is totally bloody ridiculous, you know that, yes I do, but I have to pass it on. So there's a problem with those sort of back-to-back contracts, is that Fulton Hogan, who are a reputable contractor, had to play the Cowboys game. So they're like total idiots. Okay, but that's what it is. These guys, by the way, what they did was they were so bad at management and stuff like that, they made a loss, and the way they decided they were going to make up the loss was they were going to claim variations, which they were not entitled to. And so even Fulton Hogan admitted that they were not justified, that these guys had that contract. So part of the contract agreement was Fulton Hogan had to pass it on, or pay it themselves. So the engineer cannot issue. So once again, the engineer has powers under this contract. Does not have powers under this one. Okay. Now what that means is that there always needs to be this person on site, the contractor's representative. Even if he's the only person for the contractor there. So some projects nowadays, you'll find people, some companies, they'll have the management team as their own people, and then everything else will be done by subcontractors. Okay? So the engineer is always working with that person there, and that person has to be there all the time, because that person is the only one that can give instructions to those guys. So that is why the contractor's representative is required to be on site at all times to receive instructions. Okay. So bonds and insurances, I'll just tell you what these things are, but on Thursday we're going to sort of work through them in a lot more detail. So a bond is a third party. So a third party surety. Okay. And so what they have is a bond. So it's a third party surety who undertakes to pay the principal if this person can't perform their obligations. So that's a contractor's bond. So if this person here can't fulfill their obligations, this person will pay the principal a certain amount of money to try to get them back on track. You won't pay them to the full value of the work, you'll pay them the costs of having to re-tender, having to find another contractor, having to pay the engineer more time to re-tender the whole thing, having to any interest that the principal might have because taken out a loan to do the work, it's going to be delayed and has to pay more interest. So the costs associated with this person not being able to do their job is paid for by the surety. Why do you think we have a third party there? Why don't you say, well, if the contractor can't do his job, then he pays the principal all the stuff? So what sort of stuff might happen there? So this is the contractor is unable to fulfill his obligations. So what's the main obligation of the contractor under the contract?
To complete the job specified.
To do the job. Do the job properly, yeah. So if he can't do that, what's going to happen?
Principal can sue.
Right?
The principal can sue.
Principal's stuff, yeah. The principal has to do it, yeah. Or the principal has to find someone else to do it. Okay, and that's going to cost money and time. So, why do you think that the contractor can't fulfill his obligations? So we have this third party here who's going to pay for it. Why don't we just sort of sue the contractor? Yeah, usually the reason why he can't do it is he's gone bankrupt. Okay, so that's what happened here, Mainzeal. Mainzeal were a big construction company. They just went bankrupt overnight, and they had about 10 to 20 sites around Auckland, big construction projects. And in the night, someone went along to put padlocks on the gates. Even the subcontractors couldn't get on site. So you had guys who couldn't get on site to get their toolkit that they left on site. Okay? So Mainzeal just went broke. And so you had all these people doing building in Auckland, and all of a sudden they did not have a contractor anymore. Mainzeal just disappeared. Okay? So they went after surety. Now, the surety is usually the contractor's bank, and the contractor is paying money to it. Okay, every month the contractor pays I'm not sure what to call it, payment. Every month to the surety to keep the bond in place. And so what the requirement is, as part of the contractor sets up a bond with a bank, with surety, and he keeps it up. He pays every month, he pays that bank to keep that surety in place. And at the end of the contract, he'll stop paying it and the surety won't be in place. Okay, so that's part of the contract agreement. The surety is bound to tell the principal if this person stops paying him. Okay, so if the contractor sees he's going to go broke, says I'm going to stop paying this guy, and the bond will not be in place, then the surety has to tell the principal. So we'll look at it on Thursday, but there's a form there that they need to fill in. So there's a contractual relationship between the surety and the principal. The contract is, if this guy doesn't do his job, this guy is going to pay this guy the costs of fixing it all up. Okay. But the service is being paid for by the contractor. Seems a bit funny, that's the way it works. Okay, now, so that is in case. Now there's also be a principal's bond. So what is the obligation of the principal in the contract? To pay the contractor for the work he does. So how could the principal not fulfill his obligation? Yeah, so if the principal goes bankrupt, the contractor's just spent $1 million, $2 million on materials, subcontractors' costs, paying his own people, and all of a sudden the principal folds up business overnight. He's left with this $1 million, $2 million debt. Okay, so if there's a principal's bond in place, then he can claim that from the surety. So, but principal's bond is quite rare. Now, it's usually put in place when the principal is sort of dodgy. Okay, so if you're a contractor and you're going into a contractual relationship with the principal, one of your tags, so remember a tag, what's a tag? Yeah, so one of your tags might be, we require the principal to put a principal's bond in place. Okay? And the principal might say, nah, forget about it, not going to do it, in which case they won't form a contractual relationship. But if they do, then the contractor is protected as well. And the contract, that's a pretty big step. The contractor would do that if he looks at the principal and thinks, yeah, they're doing a big job, but they're really extending themselves here. There is a chance they're going to go bankrupt, and I don't want to be the one holding the $1 million debt when they go bankrupt. So if they do, I want a contractor's bond in place. And the principal might realise that, yeah, okay, that's what I need to do to get someone to be my contractor. If I have to put a bond in place, I will, so then everyone's covered. So this is all about risk management. There's a risk to the principle that the contractor is going to go bankrupt, and the consequences of that risk are that he's going to end up with a massive grant of debt to try to get his project back on track again. There's a risk to the contractor that the principal will go bankrupt and not pay him the money that's owing. So these bonds are a way of addressing that risk. So what am I doing? So there's another series of risks. So this is the risk of one party not fulfilling each other's obligations. That's what a bond is. An insurance is a third party, an insurer, who, I've run out of colours. A third party, an insurer, okay, who undertakes to pay any compensation for losses. So that might be. So for example, if the contractor is building the building, $10 million building, $20 million building, he's had progress payments, the principal's paid him, and then the day before he has to hand it over to the principal, it burns down. Okay, someone left the welding torch on, and the whole building burns to the ground. What happened? Contractor's building it, he's responsible for building it. He's spent $10 million worth of work and materials to build this thing, and it burns down before the contract's finished. Whose problem is it? If we didn't have insurance, whose problem is it? The contractor. What do you think if someone came to you and said, oh, you've caused $10 million worth of damage, pay up, what's going to happen to you? Yeah, you can't pay it. Neither can the contractor. So most contractors can't pay it. So rather than paying the $10 million, the contractor will have to file for bankruptcy. No one wins. Okay, so what is required is the contractor takes out insurance. So if the building burns down, then a third party, the insurer, the insurance company, will pay for it. Okay, so that's what it is. Likewise, if he does damage, so he's doing an excavation next to a building, so he's doing some excavation, there's a building here, excavation falls in, the building falls over, it's a $5 million building, it's just fallen in because the contractor wasn't doing things right, so you've got a third party there that's sort of incurred a loss. So these guys here are going to be suing the contractor. If the contractor can't pay, then he is going to go bankrupt. If he has an insurer, the insurer will pay, and then the contractor will still be able to finish the job. So the insurance is all about making sure the contractor is able to pay if things go bad, because the contractor's going to have to pay for it, but most contractors can't, and so therefore they go bankrupt, which means they can't finish the job and everyone loses. So the idea is to get insurance in place and we can go. So we're going to look at this next on Thursday, okay? So contract, just talk about some. So contract works insurance, that's the one if the building burns down before it's finished, or if there's damage to the building or something like that. Public liability insurance, that's the thing if you trash someone else's Porsche or you damage someone's building or someone's property. Contractor's machinery insurance. So that's that one there is the contractor might have $1 million excavator, that's all he, that's one of his big pieces of equipment. It sort of falls down the bank, it's totally stuffed. The contractor doesn't have enough money to buy a new one. He can't finish the job because he doesn't have machinery to do it anymore. So you ask that they have their machinery insured. Now most contractors already have that, so it's usually just a case of, oh, here's our insurance, we keep the insurance up for all of our machinery. And that one, professional indemnity insurance, whether that one is for design. If the contractor does a design, it falls down, and the contractor's up for it. Okay, remember that the consultants also have professional indemnity insurance. Right, so. Okay, what we'll do now is take a break. If you could be back at 5:02, please. Answer the question, what do you do if things change? So remember, the contract document has certain scope, things that we say it's going to do. And things can change. The client might come along and say, halfway through the contract, oh no, we don't want 1 metre wide footpaths, we want it to be 2 metres wide. Or it might be when you're doing the construction, you have a foundation system, and when you do the when you start installing it, you realise that the soil is different from what you thought it would be, so you have to redesign the foundation system. Okay, so that doesn't mean that you can say, oh well, we can't do the work, so we have to ditch the whole contract. The contract, SDS 3910 allows you to change the conditions of the contract. Now, if it changes, it needs an agreement on both parties, so both the principal and the contractor have to agree to a change. Okay. Now, oftentimes, that's not a problem. So what the Section 9 does is about 5-6 pages, and it sets out what the variations are. So what I want you to do is just look at, so what are the different things so look at section 9.1. And what are the reasons why you might have a variation?
Section
9.1.1. So section 9.1, the engineer, remember the engineer orders them, not the principal. The principal can't rock up on site and say, oh, could you make the footpath a bit wider? Okay, he has to ask the engineer to ask the contractor. So the reason for that is there should be only one person giving orders on site, and that is the engineer. Okay, if there's two people, then there's going to be confusion. So there has to be one person. And remember, the engineer can only be one person. It can't be a company. It can't be a whole lot of people from a company. It has to be one actual person. So any orders come from one person. So increase or decrease the quantity of work. So that might be, could you put another footpath on the other side of the road? Can you make the footpath wider? Can you put another window in that wall over there, whatever. So increase the work. Or it might be, oh, we're running a bit low on budget. We've had a few other variations. We want to bring it in on budget. So what we're going to do is that road has two footpaths down either side of the road. What we're going to do is we're going to get you to not build one of them. So you can also remove stuff from it. So oftentimes you'll find when a project starts, you say, well, we don't have to build the whole thing. So we don't have to build that footpath there, we'll build it later on. So you can also withdraw work from the contract as well. So you can omit any work. Change the character or quality of any material workmanship. So it might be that you're building a house and they say, well, I noticed that you've got stainless steel handles there, we'd like gold. Or I noticed you've got galvanized steel brackets, we want stainless steel brackets. So what you've done is you've changed the quality of the material. Or it could be the character. So also, if you're digging, say, for a pipeline, and it might have been the geotech and the whole contract says that the material you're excavating is clay, but you strike rock, that has changed the character of the work. The work is no longer excavating in clay, the work is now excavating in rock. So you've changed the character of the work, and therefore it is a variation. The contractor, it's going to cost them more money to excavate in rock, and so therefore he should be paid for it. So that's what this is all about. Require additional work to be done. Case in point, I saw them someone was installing a pump station once, and they'd sort of designed it so that it was just, what was it? So there's a pump station building there, and they designed it to just have a normal pad foundation. Okay, so a pad foundation is just a concrete slab, because they thought the soil was quite strong. But then when they got there, they found that there was this mucky bit here of mucky clay, and that went down really, really deep. And they realised that they couldn't use that pad foundation because the whole thing would settle. And what they needed to do was they needed to have a pile system. And so what they did was they issued a variation for the changing. So they said, we'll delete the foundation, and now we're installing the pile foundation. So the conditions, the contract scope, what we're doing for the contract, has now changed from building a building with a pad foundation to building a building with a pile foundation. And that can be done, okay? But it's not done free of charge. So it's not saying, hey contractor, we've changed the rules, it's not pad foundation anymore, it's pile foundation. With the variation, it also means that there will be a change in the tender price. So the contractor might have said it's going to be $1 million when he put in his tender, but now it's going to be another $200,000. So the tender price has now changed to $1,200,000. So the tender price can change. the contract price to change. So that's what the variation does, it allows the contract price to change. What would be the other thing? So there'd be extra cost. What would also be another result from having to do piles as opposed to band foundation? More time. So the variation also allows the completion date to be extended. Okay. Or it might be to change the line level and position of the pipeline. So it might be that you sort of got a pipeline going like this, and all of a sudden you realise that along here there's some crappy soil, and so you like the pipeline to go like this. Okay. Now it might not be any extra cost at all, it might not take the contractor any more time, it's just instead of going this way, you're going this way. Okay, and if you can catch it early enough, it's not going to cost any extra, but it's still decided as a variation because you're changing the scope of the work. The original scope of the work was you build a pipeline from there to there, like this, and now the scope is to build a pipeline along that line. So when things change in the contract, it's a variation. They usually do, include an increase in price, or a decrease in price sometimes, and also a change in time. Sometimes it's just things that happen and you're responding to it, like striking rock instead of clay, or striking crappy soil. And sometimes the client just says, oh, wait a minute, we need to change this, or that this isn't right. Or we all of a sudden decided we want to widen for a path, because we want to have wide some whatever. So they're allowed to do that, but they will pay for it. Okay, so that's what variation is all about. So how does that, so we'll look at this more on Thursday, next week on Monday. So to do that, there's a process, and what this does, it describes the process. So who's the person that orders the change? The principal wants to change the, make the footpath wider. Who orders it? The engineer. So 9.1.2, the engineer. There's one person and one person only that gives orders on the site, and that is the engineer, not the principal. And 9.1.4 says the contractor has to do it. So that's another thing, is variations that, you know, the contractor can't say, nah, can't be stuck, we want to move on to the next project. No, he has to do it within reason. And so the value of the variation shall be added or deducted from the contract price. In other words, the contract price will change. Okay. And the way that they do that is what's called a variation order. We'll look at VOs next week. So the instruction, the VO, the variation instruction, is from the engineer to the contractor. It says, dear Mr. Contractor, please delete the pad foundation in the design and construct this pile foundation. And along with that VO will be a set of drawings showing the new design. And it will say, and they will have agreed on a price, or hopefully come up with a price, and they'll say the contract price has been changed from this much to this much. So basically it's a formal statement from the engineer to the contractor saying the contract has changed. There has been a variation. That's what a variation order does. In addition to that, there will be what's called a contract instruction, which will be an instruction from the engineer to the contractor to make the change. So the variation order acknowledges that there's been a change in the contract conditions. The contract instruction tells the contractor to do it. Okay. Might seem a bit confusing, but when it runs, it sort of works out really well. Now, a bit tricky bit is, how do you value the variations? So how do you figure out how much this is going to cost? What do you think you might do? So have a look at that page 9.3, what happens? Who figures out, who does the first estimate of how much the variation is going to be? If the engineer just go up and say, oh, I reckon that's going to be about $10,000. Is that the way it works? So 9.3.
Contractor? Is it the
What
contractor?
happens?
The contractor notifies engineer proposed value.
Yeah. So 9.3.2, 9.3.1. Wherever practicable, variation shall be valued before the work involved is commenced. Now, in this case here, they've opened up the sites, they have all the equipment on site ready to go to build this building. Would it have been reasonable to stop the works for 2 weeks while they figured out how much this price was going to be? Okay, so while it's nice to be able to value it before you do the work, usually you end up in a situation where the works just have to carry on and you're busy doing the work and figuring out how much it's going to cost at the same time. Okay? Because you do not want to stop the works. You do not stop the works to value a variation. Okay? That's what 9.3.1 says. Okay, so 9.3.2 is the contractor. The contractor says this is how much it's going to cost. As soon as he possibly can, but it doesn't mean that he stops work. So the engineer then has a look at it, decides that it's reasonable, there's a bit of negotiation. Sometimes there's stuff in the schedule of quantities you can use to value it. Okay, you reach an agreement on it, then you issue the variation order, and it's all formalised. But I can't emphasise enough that it does not stop the works. So the price of the variation and the work on the variation usually happens at the same time. Right. So payments. We'll look at this more on Thursday. So, as I said before, the contractor. So here's enough time along here, and here's the costs. So the contractor, when he starts the work, so he might be spending, so if you look at his bank account, so he might be spending money, then things really start picking up, and he's starting to spend quite a lot of money, and then it all these drops, so that's the S-shaped curve, right? So that's the amount of money, so it's cumulative. So the first few months he's spending a little bit, then he starts increasing his value. So he's spending a lot of money over the period of time, that's cumulative cost, all right? So that might be $10 million or something like that. So and if he's not paid for that, he has to pay for that. So he's been paying for the cost of materials, the cost of his people, the cost of the plant, his fuel, all that sort of stuff. Now if he has to go to the bank and loan that until he gets the payment there, so it might be that he gets the payment there, that's his profit. Okay, so this is how much it costs him to do the work, then there'd be money there. So if he got a big payment at the end, then he'd still have to loan money to cover himself for all of that. So what he'd do is he'd add a little bit extra to his price to cover the cost of the interest, okay, which doesn't really benefit the principal at all. So what the principal does is he might pay him money as he goes. This is cumulative. So every month, the principal will pay him a little bit of money. And then the last time he does it, he goes over the top. Notice that the principal will pay, so these are payments. So this is the payment for this month, so it's cumulative once again. So that's how much he gets paid for this month here. So that's the way his bank account's increasing. Okay, so notice that there's a little gap between there and there. So he spent this much money, he's earned this much money. Okay, so this is the bit that he has to get from his bank, or whatever. Okay, why do you think you don't pay him the full amount? Why don't we sort of pay him, say, okay, well, he spent this much money, so we'll pay you this much money. Why don't we do that? Yeah, take the money and run away, go fishing. Yeah, I'm out the money, I'm out of here. Okay, I don't really care. Okay, so you want to keep it. So the idea is that the principal keeps a little bit of the contractor's money back and then at the end he gets the money. So when he's completed the work, he gets part of it. But he's been paid enough to keep himself going, pay all his bills, he's just not got enough profit to run away. Okay, so that's called retention. So every payment, the client will kick back a little bit. So they say you've done $10 million, so you've done $1 million worth of work this week, this month, but we're going to pay you $900,000. We're going to keep $100,000, which we owe you, in another bank account, which is not available to you, not available to us. When you finish the work, you will get that money from that bank account. So there's a little bit here. So every month, so every month, a little bit of that goes into the retentions. So retentions. Okay. Okay. So when he has finished it, practical completion, when he's done everything that is required of the contract and the engineer has certified that he's done it, then he gets some of that money back. Okay? Now we'll talk about it later, but he gets usually 50% back. And then 6 months later, when the defects liability period is finished, we'll talk about that in a minute. When the defects liability period is finished, he gets the rest of it back. So retentions are money that the client keeps, that the principal keeps back. There's also an allowance for cost fluctuations. Not used all that much in New Zealand because our inflation is only about 2%. But in the old days, it used to be 10, 15%. So you might put a price in for something. You might put a so when you tendered for it in January, it might have been that the materials was going to cost $1 million. When they finally give you the work in June or something like that, halfway through the year, everything might have increased by 10%. So materials that you priced for $1 million were now going to cost you $1,100,000. Sorry, $1.1 million. Okay, so when you've got high inflation, there needs to be an allowance for cost fluctuations. Prices go up between when you put in the tender and when you actually do the job, then that needs to be covered. So places with high inflation, not so much a problem in New Zealand because our inflation's pretty more manageable. So we'll look at payments in a minute later on. Disputes. Okay, so disputes. So dispute. So it's a contractual relationship. There's two parties involved. There's a lot of money involved. You all disagree on things. Okay. Now, there's different ways of settling a dispute. So how can you settle a dispute? If the principal and the contractor disagree with each other, what can they do? What do you do if you disagree with your friend or your partner or something like that? So that's one way of doing things, sue each other. Okay, is that a good solution, suing each other? Every time something goes wrong, you sue each other. Why? Yeah, lawyers love it. Lawyers would say, yeah, great, sue each other. Love it. Okay. So what's a better way of solving a dispute?
Come to a conclusion.
Sorry? Yeah, talk about it. Okay? Everyone puts on their adult clothes, walks into a room and sits down and talks about it. Now the engineer is usually the first person that's there. So that's one of the first duties of the engineer, is that there's a dispute between the principal and the contractor, then the engineer's job is to come up with a fair decision. So listen to both sides of the story and say, well, I think he's right, or I think you both need to compromise here, or whatever. Okay, so it's the principal and the engineer's job to do it. Now, if that doesn't work, then you would get a third party, someone else, someone that's not the engineer. Now, it might have been that for the contractor and the engineer are ready to kill each other, or the engineer and the principal are ready to kill each other, or you're ready to kill each other. So you're all not getting on very well, and you're all trying to score points with each other. That's when you need someone from outside, a mediator. So the mediator's job is to come in and talk. Okay. So the first thing is the engineer. So in the dispute stage, the matter is referred in writing to the engineer for a formal decision. So it might be that you're having a discussion on site, they're saying that's rock, there's rock, and the principal's saying, well, it's not rock, that's soil. So they're having a big discussion, big argument, and the engineer goes on site and he says, well, I think it's rock. Okay. What can happen then is either party can say, put that in writing. We want you to review it all and put it in writing. In other words, the engineer, even though he said and made a decision on site, he now has to review it again and say, am I right? What part of the contract have I based that on? Not what is my gut instinct or what I feel, or if I feel like that person's a total jerk and I just want to score some points off them. He needs to say in the contract document what is a fair decision here, and he needs to write that down. So that's what engineers review is. He might have said a few things or whatever, he might have said, I think this, I think that. When one of the parties asks for an engineer's review, the engineer has to go right back from scratch and look at it and say, well, what's right, what's wrong, and then write down what decision he's made and why he's made it. Okay. Now, a judge does the same thing. So a judge, you sort of see them in court, they do all that sort of stuff. At the end of the day, they have to sit down and they have to write a report about every judgment they've made and then state what rule of law they applied to come to that decision. So judges do it as well. Okay, they have to justify every decision that they make. And they can sit there and say, oh, we'll take it back and beat it up or whatever. Okay, judge has to justify it. So does the engineer. This is what the decision that I made, this is why I made it, based on the contract agreement, not based on what I think about everyone, not based on anything else, this is what I think about. So, it's referred to him, and he reviews it all, and he produces it. So if one of the parties doesn't like it, then they can say, I want to go to mediation. Both parties agree on the mediator, and the mediator reviews the evidence. So what the person has to do is try to get them to reach an agreement. This is the nice person, okay? They're usually nice people, mediators. Okay, so they'll talk with both parties, so they'll talk to the principal and get his view of things, talk to the contractor, get his view of things, maybe talk to the engineer and get a bit of background on things, and then they'll bring them all together and say, well, what about if you do this, what about if you do that, you want to compromise, blah, 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 blah. So he's sort of basically the peacemaker. And then he tries to get them to reach an agreement on their own. Okay, all nice and warm fluffy. Okay, if they don't, then he issues, or she issues a decision. This is my view of what should happen, and he puts it in writing. And then both parties get a look at it, and they've got 20 working days to say, yeah, that's, or not, or to say that's fine, or I disagree. Now, if no one disagrees, then that's it, it becomes binding. It is now an agreement. Even if no one said I agree, if they haven't said, if no one disagrees, then it becomes binding. So both parties, they can't sort of object to it anymore. If they let 20 days elapse, they don't say anything, then it's binding. We can't do any further with it. However, in 20 days, if one of them says, I disagree, I don't like this, they go to arbitration. Okay? Now, arbitration, this guy's nice and fluffy, and you all sit in a nice comfy room, and you're sort of trying to get on with each other. This one is you both lawyer up, and you start ripping strips off each other. Okay, this is adversarial. So you've both got lawyers, and the lawyer's one job is to rip strips off the other guy, and he's got a lawyer, and he's doing the same to you. So basically, it's a court, and this is where things get nasty, and this is where people start scoring points off each other. This is where the lawyers make lots of money. So the arbitrator sits there, investigates it, questions both parties, and then decides on what it is. And then makes a decision, final and binding. You can't object to it, unless there's something wrong with the law. So if the arbitrator ignores the law or something like that, you can take it to court and you can sue each other all over again. Okay. So notice that those first two steps there, the engineer's review and the mediation, are both without lawyers. Okay. So, as part of in the bidding process, you're required to sign this, or both parties actually do. So what it does is it says we agree to go through this process. In other words, we agree that we will go through the engineer's review process, we will go through the mediation process, and we will go to arbitration if we need to, rather than go to court. Because the minute we go to court, things get even nastier. Okay? And the reason why I put that in there is because as engineers, we want to try to keep lawyers out of it as much as possible. We don't want to go to court to sue each other. So that's what this is all about. So that's disputes. Okay. So now we're looking at time period, time completion. So, have a look at that and see if you can. So the date of acceptance of tender. So each of these, I think there's one missing. Which one's missing? Okay, so acceptance of the colleagues up. I'll just point out that I might just tell you the story. Okay, so when do you think that top one there, the top there, contract with the title of possession of the site, what happens there? What's that one? Which one of these is it? Date of commencement. Okay, so at a certain point in time, the contractor is allowed to start working on the site. He has to have his bonds and insurances in place, and he has to amend all the other requirements of the contract. Okay. So he's entitled to possession of the site. So the engineer, so the engineer says you're entitled to possession of the site, but he's not allowed on the site until he's got his bonds and insurances in place. Why is that? Why is the contractor not allowed to start work until the bonds and insurances are in place? What happens if he sort of breaks something while there's no insurance?
Yes,
He has to pay and go bankrupt. So they say you can't start work until you've got bonds and insurance in place. So he may be entitled to possession of the site, but if he hasn't put the bonds and insurances in place, then he's not allowed to start work. So there could be a period between when he's allowed to start work and when he's, period between his, the clock starts, okay, and when he's actually allowed to start work. So what's this one here?
Contract period.
Contract period. So in the contract, there will be a set period of time. So for Jackman Avenue, what's the set period of time? Time for completion is section 10. So tell me Jackman Avenue, how much time do they have to do the work? 60 days. So how many weeks is that? 12 weeks or 8.5? 12 weeks. Remember, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are days. Saturday, Sunday aren't. So it's 5 working days per week. So that's 12 weeks. Yeah. Okay. No allowance for inclement weather, which means that in that 60 days they haven't allowed inclement weather. So if rain causes a delay, then that's variation. Okay, you can't claim an extra money, but you can claim extra time. So that's what that is there. So what that is the contract agreement says the contractor shall start the work, and then when the clock's ticking, the contract period shall be 60 days. At the end of that 60 days is the due date for completion. Okay, so the contract agreement is I will have these works completed by this period of time here. Now, all because that's the due date for completion doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen. Okay, it might be the contractor's not put enough resources on or anything like that. So that one there would be actual construction period. So hopefully, the practical completion certificate. So the way it works is they do the work, and when they've finished it, when the contractor's finished the work, he'll say to the engineer, "I've finished the work, could you please issue the practical completion certificate?" Okay, that's another term you need to know, practical completion certificate. So what that means is that the engineer will look at the contract, and he'll go outside, he'll walk around and say, has this person finished the work? Has he done everything in that contract document that is required to do? Has he done it properly? He'll be looking at the quality, the inspection reports. He'll be looking at, is everything being built properly? And if he says yes, he has done everything required by this contract, then he'll issue the practical completion certificate. Okay, so at that point in time, that half the retentions, that money that the principal's been keeping back goes to the contractor. Also, the contractor doesn't have to keep insurances in place anymore, or a bond. Okay, so it doesn't have to keep on paying those. The site, or the works, now become the property of the principal. Up until now, the person responsible for the site was the contractor. Okay, when this is issued, the works, if it's a building or a road, is handed over to the principal. It's the principal's problem. If it all burns down the day after practical completion is issued, it is the principal's problem. If it burns down the day before, it's the contractor's problem. So you're handing the works over, you don't have to keep insurance in place, and you've met all the contractor's met all of his contract obligations. Okay? So hopefully you will have done this before the due date of completion. Okay, so hopefully that happens before that. Okay. What would be the facts if you sort of delivered it late? So due date of completion, the client said, I'm on top of the contract requires you, your obligation is to deliver this thing by the end of May, but the contract is delayed, doesn't put enough resources on, it doesn't deliver it until the beginning of June. So it's one month delay. What effect is that going to have on the contractor? On the principal. So he was promised it was going to be delivered. The agreement was it would be delivered at the beginning of May. It's delivered at the end of June. What's going to happen to the principal? So let's say it's a building, and he's going to take this building and let it out as office space and get money for that.
Loses money.
Sorry?
He'll lose enough income.
He'll lose some income from that. So he had people all lined up, ready to pay him $1,000 a week for office space. He's got about 20 or 30 of those, so that's $20,000 a week that these people are going to pay him, and it's a month delay, which means that he sort of loses how much money? $20,000 a week for 4 weeks. How much is that? So he's lost $80,000 because the contractor hasn't delivered it on time. What else is going to happen? So now the contract's running a month longer than what it did before. What else is going to happen? Are there any other costs for the principal? So he might have taken out $10 million loan. He might be paying $100,000 a month in interest rates. So there's another $100,000 that he has to pay the bank because the thing's not being delivered on time. He also has to employ the engineer for another month to do all the monitoring. So what's happened is, because the contractor has not met his obligation to deliver on time, the principal has suffered damages. He has suffered loss of money. Okay? So that's what liquidated damages are. So right at the beginning of the contract. Now what he can do is he can go to the courts, or he could have gone to the courts and said, this guy said he delivered it in May, delivered it in June, it's cost me $250,000. And he could sue him for it. Okay? But then, you've got lawyers involved who don't like that. So what we do is we agree right at the beginning of the contract, for every week that the contract is delivered late, the contractor will pay the principal a certain amount of money, and that's liquidated damages. So for the Jackman Avenue pipeline, what were the liquidated damages there? $3,500 per week. Every week if he ran over, he would be, so in other words, what the principal does is he owes the contractor for that last payment. Okay, he takes $3,500 off one week. Oh, he still hasn't delivered it. Oh, no, $3,500 coming off every week until he delivers the back. He gets the principal completion certificate. Okay. So contractors are obviously pretty keen that that doesn't happen. What that does is a liquidated damages is just a recognition of if you run over time. So you have to calculate that amount. Okay. It can't be a punishment. You can't say every week you run over you have to pay me $1 million. Okay, what the liquidated damages has to be is an estimate of the actual cost that it's going to cost the principal if the contractor runs over time. Actually estimate, not a punishment. So you can't say $1 million a week, make sure he brings it in on time, because that's not what it is. Liquidated damages is an estimate of what those costs are going to be, and it means you don't have to go to court to sue each other for it. Now, after the practical completion certificate is issued, the contractor has delivered everything in place, ready to go, but there's another period called the defects liability period. Now, if you buy a TV set and it blows up the next week, what happens? You go to Noel Lehman, whatever it is, you buy a TV set, blows up the next week. What do you do? Take it back. They say tough. What? As a warranty, yeah. So when you buy a TV or a car, you usually have a warranty or a guarantee for a period of time. So they say this thing comes out a year from, within the next year, then we'll replace it or something like that. Now the problem we have with engineering work, civil engineering work, is you can't say, oh, that road's not working properly, take it back. You can't do that, it's very well. So the way we do it is we say, if there's a problem because of what the contractor did, if he didn't build it properly, and the defects show up within a certain period of time, then the contractor is responsible for fixing it. So remember we talked about the retentions, how only half of those retentions are paid out when the practical completion certificate is done. So the client is usually sitting on some of the retention money still. Okay, so it's in the interest of the contractor to fix those defects. So for example, it might be a road and potholes might start showing up. And it might be because they didn't complete the road properly, so it's the contractor's problem to fix it. Okay. If he doesn't fix it, then the principal can hire someone else to do it and pay that person out of the retentions. So he might have $30,000 worth of retentions. He hires Fred Blogs to sort of fix it. Gives the contractor a couple of weeks to fix it. Contractor doesn't do it, so he rings up his mate Fred. Fred goes along, fixes it, charges the principal $2,000. The principal, when he pays the retentions to the contractor, takes that $2,000 out of it. So he's holding the contractor's money. Okay, so that's what the defects liability period is. Okay, that's only for defects caused by poor workmanship or poor materials or something the contractor does. So if you had a road and say you had crash barriers and stuff like that, and the road's been running for about 3 months or something like that, and someone crashes into the crash barrier, is that something that would be covered by the contractor? Or not? Okay, so someone crashing into the crash barrier, or someone trashing a wall or something like that, a building or something like that, that's not the fault of the contractor, therefore he shouldn't have to pay for it. But if it was something like a pothole, or a window falls out or something like that, or a door doesn't work properly, or the wastewater system blows up. Okay, those things are all the fault of the contractor in the first place. Okay. So, we might do that in class as well. So what I've done here is I'm just taking you through some of the more obvious ones. What we're going to do in class on Thursday is we're going to go through some of the things that you'll do on site. So, for example, one of the things you have to do is calculate what the due date for completion is. So I'll do that next week. You need to be able to figure out a progress payment. So we'll work through a progress payment. I think we'll do that on Monday next week. You need to be able to fill in a variation sheet for these kind of contract construction things. So on Thursday, we're going to start, and Thursday and next Monday, we're going to start doing the things that you do on site as part of the contract administration. Okay? Are there any questions about all this? I know it's all quite new to you, but it's stuff you need to know. Sweet. See you all.